He may try in 5 or 7 years if we fail to make the necessary investments. Those were the words of NATO chief Mark Rutte when asked if Russia was planning to invade Estonia. His warning is clear: the Baltic state is on Russian President Vladimir Putin's agenda, and we may see a repeat of Ukraine in the early 2030s. Estonia won't take that invasion lying down. The country hears Rutte's warning and is preparing for a full-scale war against Russia. The question now is whether Estonia is capable of fending off Putin's forces or if it would collapse under Russian pressure if Putin invades. On July 5, current NATO head Mark Rutte sat down for an interview with the New York Times. Speaking in Brussels in the wake of a massive NATO summit in which he pledged that NATO would set a new target for its members of spending 5% of their gross domestic product, or GDP, on their militaries by 2035, Rutte clearly had future Russian aggression on his mind. Aggression that may soon focus on Estonia. The Baltic state was recently the subject of an article in The New Yorker, which focused on a massive military exercise being conducted in the country. That same article pointed out some major problems Estonia may face in the future, noting that the country had no air force or navy to repel a future Russian invasion. Rutte was quizzed about his thoughts on this situation, and he was quick to warn Putin away from Estonia. No. What The New Yorker described there is right, but it's not a wake-up call, because we have all the plans in place that if Estonia will be attacked, and the Russians know this, our reaction will be devastating, Rutte told the New York Times. As for what that reaction might entail, Rutte chose not to go into any specific details. I cannot go into all the details, because Vladimir Putin, I know, is watching these programs. But we have to make sure that we not only have those plans but we also have the people and the military gear to back it up, Rutte said. However, he did reveal that any plans to defend Estonia would see the United States play a key role. And this is exactly why we need to spend more. But it's not that the Estonians are left to themselves. It would be the full force of NATO, including the full backup of the United States, which will come to the rescue, Rutte added. So, that's good news for Estonia, right? Not necessarily. While Rutte warned that Putin knows he faces the full fury of NATO if he invades Estonia, that force needs to become what Estonia needs it to be. Otherwise, Putin's invasion will come sooner, rather than later. This is why he will not attack Estonia today, Rutte added when speaking about NATO. But he might in 5 or 7 years if we would not make all these extra investments. The message is clear: NATO needs to spend big now or Estonia is next on Putin's list. Rutte's words aren't anything new to Estonia. The country had been warning of Putin's aggression for months before the NATO chief acknowledged the problem. Back in February, Reuters reported on comments made by Kaupo Rosin, who is the chief of Estonia's foreign intelligence service. Rutte's more recent comments are merely echoes of what Rosin said months ago. Russia has chosen a path which is a long-term confrontation, and the Kremlin is probably anticipating a possible conflict with NATO within the next decade or so, Rosin said at the time. And like Rutte, Rosin knows that preparation is the key to dealing with Putin's ambitions. If we are not prepared, the likelihood of a military Russian attack would be much higher than without any preparation, the intelligence chief added. What we have here are warnings. 2 of them, one from a key figure in Estonia's intelligence service and another from the head of NATO itself, both of whom are saying that Putin wants to pick a fight with NATO and he's going to use Estonia as the launching point for his future war. But that only brings us to some questions. Why does Russia want to invade Estonia? How is Estonia preparing for a fight with Putin, and is it really ready to win that war if it does start in the next 5 to 7 years? We'll start with why. And, as with so many things when it comes to Putin, it all comes down to history. Estonia has a long history of finding itself under foreign rule. At various points during its history, it has been occupied and controlled by Germany, Sweden, and Russia, the latter of which laid claim to the country for decades up until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was in that same year that Estonia declared its independence in the wake of the August coup in Moscow. Finally, after so long under Russian rule, Estonia was a sovereign nation. Putin thinks it shouldn't be. And evidence of that comes from the strange interview US pundit Tucker Carlson held with Putin in February. Putin didn't mention Estonia by name in that interview. He didn't have to. Instead, Putin offered long and rambling justifications for his invasion of Ukraine that hinted at why Estonia, and countries like it, are on his radar. That's according to the Atlantic Council, which noted that much of Carlson's interview with Putin turned into a pseudo-history lesson from Russia's president. After sidestepping Carlson's initial question, the Council says, Putin launched into a rambling half-hour lecture covering more than 1,000 years of Russian and Ukrainian history that placed the roots of today's war firmly in the distant past. His core message was chillingly simple. Ukraine has no right to exist and he is fully justified in waging a war of aggression to reclaim historically Russian lands. The diatribe essentially amounted to Putin claiming that Russia's conquests of the past should hold true today. It's a similar message to one Russia's leader delivered in the summer of 2022, mere months after he launched his Ukraine invasion, in which he compared himself to Russia's former Tsar Peter the Great. Peter the Great waged the Great Northern War for 21 years. It would seem that he was at war with Sweden. He took something from them. He did not take anything from them, he returned what was Russia's. The Guardian reported Putin as saying at the time. Apparently, it is also our lot to return what is Russia's, and strengthen the country. And if we proceed from the fact that these basic values form the basis of our existence, we will certainly succeed in solving the tasks that we face. Putin's obsession with history, especially his idolization of Peter the Great, underlines a vision of reclaiming territories Russia once ruled, and Estonia, with its history under Tsarist and Soviet control, fits squarely into this expansionist ambition. Estonia's vulnerability stems from both geography and demographics. Its 210-mile border with Russia, the Russian-speaking majority in Narva, and hybrid threats like electronic jamming and propaganda. Estonia has responded with an unprecedented focus on national defense, constructing anti-tank ditches, bunkers, dragon's teeth barriers, and laying landmines, while training civilians through the Estonia Defense League to resist occupation. Recent massive drills like Hedgehog 25 involving 16,000 NATO troops demonstrate Estonia's readiness to stall a Russian offensive until NATO can intervene. Estonia lacks a substantial air force, tanks, or naval power, but compensates through asymmetric defense strategies intended to delay, disrupt, and deny advances. It has installed sirens and alarm systems, prepared rapid air responses using F-16s, and embedded national consciousness to resist aggression. Estonia increased defense spending to 5.4% of GDP, surpassing NATO's future goal and sending a signal of resolve. Yet alone, Estonia cannot match Russia's overwhelming numbers. 1.32 million active troops, thousands of tanks and aircraft, and vast naval assets dwarf Estonia's forces. The strategy is clear. Resist just long enough for NATO's collective might. Over 8 million personnel, 11,495 tanks, 13,000 aircraft, to arrive. The hybrid threat is already ongoing in Narva, where some residents nostalgically support Russia, but Estonia counters through cultural resistance and visible fortifications. Estonia's transparent preparations are meant as a deterrent signal to Moscow and as a reassurance to allies. The connection to Ukraine is clear. Russia uses ethnic Russian populations and twisted history to justify aggression, and Estonia knows it could be next if NATO appears weak or divided. Estonia's doctrine mirrors Ukraine's early improvisations but aims to avoid rapid collapse by pre-positioning defenses and involving the entire society in resilience efforts. The exercise scenarios simulate delaying actions and urban defense to buy time, emphasizing total defense involving military, police, and civilians. NATO's Article 5 is the keystone. If triggered, it obliges all members to come to Estonia's defense, transforming a local conflict into a wider war. Russia may gamble on fractures within NATO or slow Western responses, but Estonia's preparations challenge that calculation. Beyond military readiness, Estonia's resolve reflects its determination to remain sovereign after centuries of foreign domination. Its message to Putin is unmistakable: any invasion will come at high cost and risk global escalation. Ultimately, Estonia embodies the front line of democratic Europe against authoritarian revisionism, serving as both a symbolic and literal fortress. The final question remains whether NATO can act decisively and whether Russia dares to test this fragile balance. Estonia's fortifications, drills, and societal readiness illustrate that it will not surrender easily. Even as Russian hybrid tactics intensify, from border provocations to disinformation campaigns, Estonia's plan remains focused on deterrence through strength and collective defense. The world watches as Estonia prepares for a possible war that would not only shape its own fate but redefine security across Europe, setting a precedent for how small nations can stand firm against larger aggressors when backed by strong alliances and unified purpose.